is up, everybody? Welcome into the How Not to Be a Youth Pastor podcast on video. Let's go. We are on video for the first time. It only took us 70 episodes to figure it out, Derek.
It is. And it was funny. I was even driving here and I was going, we make the comment all the time how like we have a face for radio and how it's a good thing that we don't have video.
Now we can prove it.
Yeah. I wonder if we're going to lose listeners once they see the mugs attached to the voices, because the voices sound smart, if I do say so. But
yeah, I like the smart, not good, but smart.
Yeah, we sound smart, but when you throw it with the face, it might.
It also, I wonder if anybody's like, oh man, like I'm listening on Spotify right now, right? I got to hop over to YouTube and figure out
what these guys look like.
What these guys finally look like, because I've never met them before. I got to figure out what they look like, and then they're going to be wildly disappointed.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous. I'm not going to lie to you.
It could, you know what? It could go either way. Either they're going to be disappointed because they're like, oh my gosh, like really? That's the best you can do with what you got? Or they're going to be disappointed because we're both rocking some of these.
Okay, I'm so glad you said that, because I was gonna make that joke literally as soon as you were done. And I was like, do I want to make the Mary joke or not? So that you jumped in.
I do want to preface, because obviously, if you are watching on YouTube, we're gonna be on Instagram. We're not gonna share the account. We could just shoot our shot with account handles. We are recording this before we actually create the accounts.
Yep.
And so it all started from one of the previous episodes that we recorded. We just kind of were joking about needing to hire a social media manager.
Yep.
And we had somebody reach out like, hey, where do I apply? And so jokingly, I responded by creating a Google form and sending it to them. And like, hey, here's our interview process. Here's the application. And long story short, and I threw it out on Instagram as well. And long story short, a good friend of the show, Tucker, who's also, full disclosure, my brother. But
a little bit of conflict of interest, but he still got the job out of merit, not out of family ties.
The reality is that the dude runs social media and promotions and stuff for a living. And so he was like, I'd love to help out. And so we're excited to be bringing Tucker on board to the How Not to Be a Youth Pastor family. And we're excited to be on social media, on full length episodes on YouTube, as well as some reels and different clips on Instagram as well. Yeah. And nobody uses Facebook anymore, so
we need a sweet handle like Big Money Pastors or something like that.
You know, I can confidently say that that's not what it's going to be. But it also, we got to get creative with it, because it can't just be like, our Instagram handle at How Not to Be a Youth Pastor. That's too long.
Yeah.
And so like it might be like How Not _YP or something like, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
What's DJ Khaled's We the Best? Is that the?
Yeah.
It could be at We the Best.
Yeah, we'll do something like that. I think that's a great plan. But no, I feel like I need to kind of preface this whole new era of the podcast of video with the two things. One, we clearly don't know what we're doing when it comes to podcasting. So the idea, like, I'm pretty sure the number one rule of being filmed is don't look directly at the camera. I'm pretty sure, unless you
I think that's fine. It's when you just stare at the camera that you have problems.
I'm just gonna keep talking for a long time, staring right at the camera.
To be fair, we are talking to the audience, so you want it. I mean, on a film set, that's definitely the cardinal rule. But I don't think
it depends though, because like The Office, when it's a show where they know they're being filmed, it's okay to look at the camera. I mean, Jim made his whole shtick off of that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I need to kind of just get out there is that now people, unfortunately, get a firsthand look into my office. And I think the camera can get a little bit of what's going on over here. And it's not pretty. I promise I will clean it up for future episodes. This was kind of a last minute, Tucker,
You on a film today?
I think Tucker unofficially accepted the job last night, and we are filming at like 10 a.m. the next morning, and so it's not pretty. I promise I will. I'll get a little bit more organized in the future.
I'm just nervous now. I can't like type sweet nothings to my wife on my computer while you're talking and tuning you out without people knowing.
That's true. I mean, you could at least like, everybody's getting a view into. I don't know how well they can see the computers, but you can turn it a little bit.
There's nothing too confidential.
Hide all Derek's secrets. We'll see.
That's in a different folder. My secret folder.
I did not need to know that.
What? You don't put your secrets in a folder?
I keep my secrets in my head. I can't trust a computer.
That's fair.
I don't trust technology. I am a cross between. I was raised on the school of Ron Swanson and Nick Miller.
Okay.
So I can't trust the Twitterverse and all these other things.
That's fair.
That's
fair.
Okay, so we're gonna dive in. I'm really looking forward to this episode today. And the idea that we get to do it on video is just making it even better.
Yeah.
But before we dive in, Derek, quick question of the day. What book of the Bible do you recommend to someone who is a newer Christian? They show up, they're like, hey, Derek, I'm new in my faith. I want to start reading the Bible. There's 66 options. Which one would you recommend I start with?
I mean, Leviticus seems like the obvious choice, right?
I knew that one was going to come up.
But no, in all honesty, it's funny because I thought there was like, in my opinion, there's like probably 5 really good options. My personal favorite, the one that I recommend to everybody, and ironically enough, as a church, we're actually going through this together right now, like 1 chapter a day, and everyone's doing soap. We're uploading it to our Facebook. It's been a really cool thing. But if you're newer to your faith or just newer to reading the Bible in general, I really like Matthew. And it's simply because it's fairly linear in the sense of like it does a good job of explaining the life of Jesus in succinct order. It's not a complete, exactly every single event from start to finish, but it really just captures the picture of who Jesus was and is, in a way that is succinct and well. All the different gospels have different emphasis, but Matthew just feels like a really good on-ramp to get you a good overall view of the life of Jesus and like the life of the disciples too, and how we kind of fit into that picture. So that's always my go-to, and I'm always a big believer in like, along with that, I always push translation. Like if you're newer to getting into the Bible, read Matthew in a translation you understand. And I've made that point here before.
Leviticus, New King James.
There you go.
That's where it's at. The other, while we're throwing out terrible suggestions, the other one that came to my mind was obviously Song of Solomon.
Of course.
Song of Songs. That's a good one.
Especially for youth students.
For those new Christians, youth students for sure. Oh dear. Matthew, I love the suggestion, Matthew. That was one of the first 2 that came to my mind. The other one that I love to recommend is James. Just from a practical standpoint, just some nice baseline things for following Christ. I think that's a good one. You mentioned you have like 5? What are some of the other ones?
I mean, I think any of the gospels are a good choice.
Those were 4 of the 5.
Yeah, you really can't go wrong with that. What I do like about like James is it's short.
Mm-hmm.
I think for some people it's one of those things where it can feel daunting to tackle a book of the Bible. James is 5 chapters long, so you can just pound it out basically and just get it done. The other, I don't always recommend this to everybody, but the other one that came to my mind is like sometimes Psalms is really good too. Obviously tackling the whole book of Psalms is an undertaking, but if someone's really going through a lot of emotions, is newer to the Bible, I really kind of direct them there just because David's so expressive in his walk with the Lord, and he just really kind of lays it out. And I think there's freedom there, and just seeing how David goes, like, I eat my tears, because I'm so sad. And it's like, okay, yet he still praises the Lord. So again, that's yeah, I kind of laugh, but yeah, like 5, like 4 of the gospels, that's the first 4.
Right. That feels like cheating.
It does.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
I will say if there was one of the gospels that I had to place 4th on that list, it would probably be John.
Yeah.
because that one tends to be a little bit more just hard. There's different. The way that John writes is closer to Paul than it is anybody else.
When he hops around so much too, you know.
I mean, it's even back then. All of the gospel writers, you see this a little bit, and this is obviously a rabbit trail that we are famous for.
Yep.
But a common literary style was not to necessarily write chronologically,
right?
But it was to write, with the idea of I'm telling this story and I'm gonna organize it by context, by topic. It's not necessarily going to be in a chronological order, but I agree. John tends to do that more than most. Plus, you have his whole. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The first 14 or 15 verses, you're like, dude, this guy was on something when he wrote this.
Yeah. When you know what it says, it's powerful.
It's beautiful, but when you are new to it and you don't know the imagery and all that,
and the Word was with God.
You're like, this is the only verse that I can think of that compares to it in confusion is when Paul writes, the things that I want to do, I do not do, and the things that I do not do are what I want to do, but I don't do the things that I do want, and I do what I don't want. And you're like, dude, shut up.
That's like that episode.
Erase this and rewrite it in simpler language.
That whole passage, you're never gonna read this the same now. That whole passage reminds me of this episode of Friends where the secret about Monica and Chandler is like coming out. And so like Rachel and Phoebe are like going back and forth, and it's like they don't know that we know that they know, you know?
Yep. Phoebe is trying to seduce Chandler to get him to confess that he is dating Monica.
You're welcome, Tucker. You just now got a whole nother picture for the collage you're gonna make to show
that's
this
the other
episode.
thing. I think we mentioned it on I listened back. If you haven't listened to our episode that we just did on tithing, it is one of the most off the rails episodes we've ever done.
Which is saying something.
Which is saying something for sure. But that one we talked about. Tucker does these little picture collages for each episode, and so we'll definitely be sharing those on Instagram so that we can all have a good laugh on all of the random. I think the first one he did had Furbies in it, and I was like, "Wow, that is a trip!" I can't believe we talked about that
on the
podcast.
Rabbit Trail Kings.
Oh yeah, it's what we do.
Definitely going in the bio for sure.
Mm-hmm. Rabbit Trail Kings.
Master of rabbit trails.
Yep, for sure. So today's episode, what we're going to do is we are going to take a look. This is maybe the episode of the podcast where the Bible will be talked about the most of the 70 episodes we've done. Because what we're going to do is take a look at a bunch of verses that typically a lot of people take them out of context, and we are going to take a look at some of these verses and try to put them back into context. And so I've got a whole list here. I'm not really sure how many we're going to get through due to the aforementioned rabbit trails. Or this first one might elicit just Kyle's soapbox of yelling at people for taking verses out of context.
Soapboxes, they're super fun.
That's kind of what we're gonna do today.
Can I make a little caveat here? I was thinking with this on the way drive in. I think the problem with like out of context verses are the message is not inherently wrong. Like a little spoiler alert. We're gonna talk here about
some of them.
Some of them, right. Like some of them. Like I'm just gonna give a spoiler here. We'll get into it. Like Philippians 4:13. Everyone takes it out of context. I can do anything. Like God does give you some supernatural strength. Like that's not inherently off base. But I think where we have to go with this, you have to understand the context around the text. Like I had a professor once who said it this way, and I've never forgotten this. He goes, imagine if you just picked up tomorrow's newspaper, open it to a random page, and started reading as if the writer was writing to you. Like, what life principle could I pull out of this? Mm-hmm. Like, and then the man walked down and gave 10 cents to or gave a quarter to the lady at Aldi so she didn't have to pay for her cart. Like, okay, good
That's
life
a
principle.
W move, by the way.
It is.
I don't know if
Super
anybody's
nice.
ever experienced that, but
That's
you
for free, by the way.
when you go to Aldi and someone's like, hey, here, just take my quarter,
yeah,
or take my cart. That's a W move.
Then you have the people who will do that and then like take the 50 cents and run.
Yeah, there's that
paying
too.
It forward, but no, like my point is, as we already started with the rabbit trail, like it's not that these messages are inherently wrong. It's just that you have to read them in the proper context to really get the true meaning of what the Lord wants to convey. So with that, Kyle, take us through our first one.
All right. First one. This is the verse that I hear the most, and every time I hear it, pretty much every time I hear it, it's taken out of context, and I hate it.
To be clear, where do you see this the most? Because I see this the most in one particular demographic of people.
I was going to say people's Instagram bios.
I mean, that's a good one. That's a really good one. I see this one the most at graduation parties.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. I like that. This one. So Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Which is a great verse for a graduating senior who's moving on to the next chapter of their life. Typically, this verse is propped up as God will do good things and he will prosper you. Sometimes, kind of weaponized in a financial way, where people use this verse to say that this means that I will be rich. God has plans to prosper me. Plans not to harm you. So that means I'm not going to get sick. And plans to give you hope in a future. And so that's where I see a lot of people go with this verse. Now, we are really, really big fans of the fact that context is important.
Yep.
This verse is written while the Israelites are enslaved by the Babylonians.
Which is not a fun trip.
And something that's worth pointing out is that their slavery lasts 70 years after this verse was written. And so when people talk about Jeremiah 29:11, I think the piece that they miss is that, and this is very common throughout all of Scripture and our interpretations, like Derek said, people miss that the Bible, when it says that the Lord has plans to prosper us, that's by his definition, not by our definition. When it says that the Lord has plans for you, that's his plans, not my plans. And so when we read Jeremiah 29:11, I think it's important to remember that we are, all of this is in the context of like, I am suffering right now. And I know that God is going to use this. I know that God can still use me for his kingdom. It is not a guarantee that I am going to have it on my terms, but it's a guarantee that he's going to use me for good, and he's got plans for me on his terms.
Yeah, and I think I look at this particular text, like he did have plans. They weren't going to be enslaved forever. I mean, he did have plans to give them the promised land, to be in the smack dab of his will. Does that mean they got to enjoy it? Not necessarily, Right. Like some of them did die while they were enslaved by the Babylonians. So you can look at that and go, did God fulfill his promise? And to the person who died, they'd say, no, he sure didn't.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where like he did though, he was true to his promise. And this is what I mean by context. It's like, if you look at this and you go, okay, I'm going to go to college and everything's going to be taken care of. Everything's going to be smooth and easy. And it's not. You might go like, what's up, God? Like, why did that not work? The power of this verse is that he's got plans that are beyond us, things that we didn't anticipate going, And so I love this actual verse because, I've clung to this verse in times when it feels like you are smack dab in the middle of the valley and you go, okay, like God doesn't feel like you have plans for me right now, but you do. And so I'm going to trust that and cling that the grass will get greener. So That's what I mean. Like if you take it out of context, it loses some of the power, and you miss the true essence of what it's trying to say. Just like this next one, because if you watch sports for any amount of time, I guarantee you will see this on a cleat, see this on a sock, see this on the eye black underneath your eyes.
Oh yeah, this is the one that I was. You mentioned grad parties for the last one. I was thinking athletes' cleats. I think Steph Curry is famous for putting this on his basketball shoes, and I also believe that this was a popular one for the eye black of Tim Tebow.
It sure was. Yep, and to be clear, I'm throwing myself into that because
you wore it as eye black.
No, but in high school, this was like my verse. Like I loved this, and again, this is what I mean. Philippians 4:13. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. To be entirely clear, God does give us strength, right?
This verse is the weightlifter's motto.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I clung on to it, because I had no actual strength. But it's one of those things, like, it's good. Like, God does give us strength. He does empower us to do tough things. But in context, Paul is awaiting trial, right? Like he is being imprisoned for his faith. He is being literally beat within an inch of his life for standing up for his faith. And the verses around this text are him saying, like, I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. What he's saying is, in plenty or in poor, I've learned to be content. Mm-hmm. When things are going really well or when they're going really terribly, I've learned to be content in my current season. And I can do all of it because He gives me strength. He gives me strength when my wallet is fat, and He gives me strength when my wallet is skimpy, just like Kyle and I's. It's one of those things where He's learned to be content in all things. And so, like, if you're going to paint this on your chest and go, I can do anything. I can go and start this business. I can go and, do impossible things because God's going to empower me. Well, no, He's not, if it's not what He wants for you. If you're going to put this on your, I keep saying paint this on your chest. I don't know why you'd paint anything on your chest. But if you get a tattoo that says, like, hey, I can do all this through Him who gives me strength, and you and go and be reckless and do something that God's not called you to do, He's not going to necessarily bless that just because you're proclaiming He gives you strength. Like Paul is, the better message here is him saying, no matter what comes my way, no matter good or bad, I can have faith that God's going to be with me through all of it. That's what he's essentially saying here.
Yeah, my contentness does not rest on my success. It rests on my security in the Lord.
Yeah.
I like that. I do feel like I need to ask, and we're just going to get really personal with Derek here. On average, how much cash would you say you have in your wallet at any one time? Oh, this is a treat. We're just pulling it out right now. So, no. Hold on. No, this is actually good. When Derek says that his wallet is thick or thin, he's not referencing cash. He's referencing the receipts that he needs to turn in.
To our office admin, who I know watches this periodically.
Dude, this is giving a little bit of anxiety to anybody watching this video right now.
To be clear,
so
you might sit here and go, holy crap, you spend a lot of money. Well, the other idea here is I'm pretty sure there are receipts in here from January.
For sure. I was going to say, like, does the magnet on that thing even actually clip anymore?
It's getting a little loose.
It can't get through all the paper.
Ironically enough, believe it or not, I have seen wallets recently that put this to shame. Literally we're like,
that's terrible for your back.
Oh, it is. It's so bad.
If you're sitting on, I'll pull out. So first of all, the reason I ask is because, who carries cash anymore?
Nobody.
I don't have any cash. And I actually typically, this little band on my wallet is where I keep my receipts.
Yours isn't a size 0, by the way.
No, it's not. But I got to just kind of shameless plug here, because I have this little lever on my wallet, and when you slide it over, pops out all of the cards and things that I carry. So that's Dave Ramsey would be proud. I don't have 12 credit cards.
Good friends of the show, wallet company.
Yeah. Fidelo.
Nice.
Never heard of them.
Definitely a Facebook ad wallet. I've seen those on Facebook.
Sure. Yeah, got it. My wife got it for me, I think, for my birthday or Christmas one year, and I love it.
Well done.
It's a win. So,
I also got my wallet for my wife because it's got a duck on it.
It does have a duck on it.
Yeah.
Look at that.
So don't insult my wallet again, okay? Thanks.
I didn't insult your wallet. I insulted your filing system.
You insulted me, which is par for the course.
No, not you, just your filing system.
Okay.
All right, next one. We're going to go to the book that actually the next two are in the two books that we just recommended people read.
Yep.
So listen to this episode before you read them so that you know how to take them in context. Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. This is right in the middle, toward the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus has this beautiful line where he says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." And the paraphrase that I see people take that is, and I believe that we can give credit to good friend of the show, Kanye West, on this one. Only God can judge me, right? It's this idea that I'm taking "do not judge or you too will be judged," and I'm turning it into God's the only person that can judge me. Nobody else here on earth gets to talk bad about me, gets to confront me on anything. And I don't think I need to explain why this is a bad idea to interpret this verse this way.
God will judge you.
Right. Well, first of all, God will absolutely judge you for that. And if God's the one judging you on it, it might be too late. But I think that it's important that we remember that as believers, we are called to hold each other accountable.
Yep.
As believers, we are not called, like, I am not supposed to shame Derek for the speck in his eye when I've got a plank in my own.
Also Matthew 7. Well done.
Accurate. But I feel like my filing system is pretty good, so I can approach Derek about his filing system for his wallet. No, but if I am, the cheesiest way I can think of to say it is pure in heart, but like I want the best for Derek. I don't want to shame him, but I want to share with him, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And this is the concern that I have. What you're doing does not align with what Scripture teaches. Like, we are supposed to hold each other accountable. That's not judgment. It's accountability. And I think that people twist this verse to say, when it says that, you shouldn't judge others, they interpret it as nobody has to hold me accountable.
Right. Well, and again, context, right? Like, it's... The Pharisees at the time were really good at judging everybody, right? Like, because they were this, and I don't mean like our modern version of judging of like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Don't quit judging me. I'm talking about like they literally judged you, like because they were the keepers of the law and because they held themselves to a higher regard, they would literally start calling shots and making decisions and actions on your behalf. Whereas, we laughed and we joked, but like the idea is that God is the true judge. And so again, I think it's like a modern use of this word judging. Like, whereas like it's like your stance on something, whereas God is the judge. Like, he is going to judge us. Like, we are going to come before him when we die and stand before him. And it's not going to be this list of good versus bad, whether you get into heaven or hell. It's, do you believe in him? But it's still one of those things where you are going to be held accountable for your actions. And so, it is one of those things where, like, I can't remember where it is. Kelly might be able to remember it, but like God talks about like not being like, consider it a good thing when God corrects you. Like, consider it a good thing. Like,
consider it great joy, brothers and sisters, when you
that's James
perseverance of many kinds.
That's not what I'm talking about. I think you actually no, you don't have that. That's also in James, but I can't remember where it is.
God corrects you.
It's not joy. The word's not joy, but where I'm going with this is it actually talks about in the word about like be good and consider it a good thing when God corrects you because he loves you. A good parent corrects their children, and so. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton more to say on this one. Is like, don't just run away from accountability and all those good things. What do you got for me?
First of all, I have a shame for anybody who says Googling stuff to learn more about the Bible is a bad idea.
Okay.
Job, of all places, chapter 5, verse 17. Blessed is the man whom God corrects, so do not despise the discipline of the Almighty.
Yep, there you go.
How's that?
Perfect.
I like it.
Well done. Thanks, Google.
Thank you, Google. Okay, next one. Talked about Matthew. Now we get to talk about James. So James chapter 5. At the end of, actually, I want to open up James because this is obviously not written by Paul. It's written by James, but James does the same thing that Paul does at the end of his. Where is it? Now I can't find it. He does this thing where, like, I'm just going to throw a bunch of verses right next to each other.
That are all like super.
That are all like not really that related to each other.
Yep.
You know what? I think I'm actually thinking of 1 Thessalonians.
Yep.
Now that I think about
it.
That's one of the better examples. Now we're going to go there just because Kyle has to prove a point.
I do think it's chapter 5, though.
Yeah, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Be joyful always. That's one verse.
Yep.
Pray continually.
Yep.
That's one verse. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will. Do not put the Spirit's fire out. Do not treat prophecies with contempt. Test everything. Hold on to the good. Avoid every kind of evil. Like
it's almost like he's like giving a sermon, and like the pastor's going like, "Hey, you got 2 minutes until I'm kicking you off the stage."
So he's trying to like squeeze all of the rest of his thoughts in at the
end.
Be
joyful. Pray a lot. Just throw everything I can possibly think at and just fire hydrant.
Resist evil. So anyways.
I'm never going to read that the same.
Yeah. So James chapter 5 verse 15 says, "And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. The Lord will raise them up. If they have sinned, they will be forgiven." And I was actually talking to one of our youth leaders last night about this verse. And he was talking about how he had a friend a couple friends, brothers, whose dad was sick. And their pastor told them straight up,
"Oh no,
you already know where this is going. If you have enough faith and pray hard enough, he will be healed." Which is one of the worst pieces of advice a pastor could ever give anybody. And this is a verse that they would probably use to prop up their belief. And you can imagine what happened. The father ended up passing away. And wait for it, at the funeral, the pastor tells them from the stage, if you had prayed harder, he would still be alive.
No shot.
Yeah.
What?
Oh my gosh. Alex is our youth leader. We were talking about it, and he's like, I have never wanted to pummel someone so close to death like I did in that. Like, that is first of all, that's a terrible way to pastor. But it's also taking verses like this out of context where, like, if you didn't get healing, you lacked faith, is basically what they're saying. And it's such a weaponized way to view a verse like this. I think that one of the things that we forget as Christians, one is, I think a lot of times we ask for healing not because we want to see the person healed, but because we want to be comfortable, and we want our own selves to be comfortable, and that means like our comfort is brought about by this person not being sick or this person not dying, because that'd be an inconvenience for me, and I wouldn't like that, so I want to pray for them to be healed. That's not a great motive for healing. I think the other thing to remember is that for someone who is sick, physical healing on earth is healing. Perfected body in heaven is also healing. And so when you pray for healing and God chooses that route of healing, just because it didn't look like how you wanted it to, doesn't mean it wasn't healing.
Yeah, and as a free little tip to pastors out there, while you know that, you don't necessarily have to share that with a grieving family just in that moment. That's one of those things. Like because Christians, it almost feels like we're so insecure in our faith that we're not allowing people to just naturally process the gravity of life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I hate the idea that there isn't a better place. Like, that might be true, but that doesn't make the person feel better here on earth right now, And so, like, It's one of my biggest bugaboos, especially in this realm. Again, I know this is not inherently what we're talking about, but as a pastor, it is so imperative that you allow people to grieve in their own way. When Lazarus died, like the disciples didn't go, "It's okay, Jesus. He's in a better place." Like, first of all, they wouldn't know that. But my point is, what's the next verse we read? Jesus wept. The man broke down. He was broken inside, and so like I have found there's so much more pastoral love and compassion that just when you have death to that level, you don't need to say anything. You just need to console, hug, listen, and just say, "Man, this is tough, and I'm sorry." And I always say I'm standing here with you, because more than they don't necessarily need answers in that moment. They just need support,
Yeah,
and so
that's true.
just be there and just love on them and give them the love that they need, just because we don't know. And that's the other thing. Like, yes, they did receive spiritual healing. I'm also not God, so I don't know why this happened the way that it did. So I'm not going to pretend and try and make sense of something that I can't necessarily make sense of. So
I'm realizing now, I think we just went straight into talking about this verse, and I never actually read it. But James 5.
Yeah, you did. You read it. Yeah,
okay.
you read it.
Okay. I for some reason I thought I didn't actually read it.
No.
Okay.
Can I read this next one? Because I am.
Yes.
I am stoked about this one.
On.
Okay.
Bring it on.
Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't think there's any context we need to share with that. We'll move on to the next one.
Wives, you just need to listen to everything your husbands say, be a cute little trophy wife, and just have no opinion and no say ever. Can I tell you why I'm excited about this verse?
Yes, please do.
Because my wife, this sounds a little sacrilegious. My wife loves the Lord. I continually am challenged and inspired by the way that my wife pursues the Lord. But if she could take a baseball bat to a human being who read this out of context, I'm convinced she probably would. Simply because she grew up in an area of the country where they took this verse very, very, very literally, to the point where it's like, I am your husband, so you listen to what I say. If I said that to my wife, she'd probably laugh at me and then proceed to slap me in the face. Because, so getting back to what Paul is not saying here. Paul is not saying that husbands just make all the decisions and get all the say and get all the power. I do believe there is a God-given desire for the man of the house to be the spiritual leader of the house. That is scriptural. I believe that. This is not to say, I talk about this in premarital counseling as well. This verse is not saying that the wife absolves into the husband's life and loses her identity. This is about understanding that, and I want you to go here in a second, Kyle, but in this verse, he's comparing the man and the wife to Christ in his church. You know what I'm saying? And so he talks how Christ is the head of the church, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I specifically left out the next few verses when I put this in here because that's the context that's important, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And how did Christ serve his church? Service, putting
complete sacrifice.
Yeah, putting the first last and last first.
Right. That's where, wives submit to your husbands as to the Lord. That's verse 22.
Yep.
If you go down to verse 25, Paul then flips the script and says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." That's where, that's the verse that not very many people read.
Right.
Because the idea is, wives, completely submit to your husbands. But then also husbands, love your wife so much that you are willing to completely sacrifice for her and put all of her needs above your own, which creates this wheel of wives submit to your husbands, sacrifice for your wives, submit to your husbands sacrifice for your wives.
It's a really good concept for marriage.
It's a great concept for marriage. And yeah, as Derek was saying, people all over the country and probably the world use this verse as actually, I'd say they use it in one of two ways. One, they use it as this is how things should be, and wives should be silent and stay in the kitchen, and husbands should make the money and make all the decisions for the family. Or I think that sometimes this verse gets used out of context to prove that the Bible is outdated and out of context and culturally doesn't apply anymore because women empowerment and all this stuff. And so like they use this verse as this is why the Bible is no longer relevant, which I think is also out of context, but equally as dangerous. Just they're doing it in a different way.
Yeah. I have nothing more. I mean, I basically where I'm going with this too is, if you are using this verse as a power trip, like you're just straight up not even following the essence of what Paul's saying here, Yeah. Because it is one of those things. If you have to pull this card on your spouse, like you're in a whole nother realm of things that probably aren't super good. Again, I firmly believe I have seen it in a really beautiful way how seeing the husband lead and take a step of faith and do something that seems difficult. And like, I think there's a lot of power and beauty to that for sure.
I think we talked about this on a previous episode, so I should just go back and look at the statistics. But I believe, we talked about this on like family or partnering with parents. I don't know what episode it was, but we talked about like if a kid in a family starts coming to church, there's like a 4% chance that the rest of the family will end up in church. If the mom starts coming to church, there's like an 11% chance that the rest of the family comes to church. If dad starts coming to church, there's like a 90-something% chance that the rest of the family comes to church.
Yeah.
Like that in and of itself is, and don't quote me on the statistics, just go back and listen to all 69 previous episodes and you'll find the actual statistics somewhere.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, it speaks to the need for both men and women to be a part of the body of Christ. And I think that most churches would say that they experience an under participation from men.
Yep. Well, and that's what I was going to say too, is in our church, there are some women who are leading the way in their family. I mean, and they are going above and beyond to raise their kids to know Jesus. And I don't want to take that away from them because that is difficult and that is crazy sometimes to be able to, among all the other things, to do that is really, really powerful and cool. So
that's true.
Yeah.
When Tucker was talking to us about being on video now, one of the things he said was he was excited to see our snacking habits.
Yep.
So thought I would bust out some Skittles at 10:30 in the morning.
You didn't get me.
And sorry, do you want some? Do you want Skittles? Do you want something
Skittles
else?
Would be great. I'm gonna read our next verse while we do this because I'm actually gonna get this tattooed on my body. This verse right here, Leviticus chapter 19 verse 22. Do not cut your bodies for the dead, or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord.
I love throughout Leviticus, there's a bunch of examples where it's like, hey, here's a law. I am the Lord. Law, 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 law. I am the Lord. It's like, is this like your version of punctuation? Or like in the Psalms, you'll see the word Selah used, and a lot of people, nobody knows for sure what it means. A lot of people think that it's like a musical notation of some sort,
like a refrain or something.
Yeah. Or like, hey, repeat this part. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is the I am the Lord in here kind of a similar, like,
nice,
just like I don't even know. I just think it's funny that you see it all throughout Leviticus. It's just, I am the Lord. I am the Lord. I don't know why, but I think it's funny. Okay. So,
I'm going to jump in quick. There's another verse that I think gets floated around with this idea even more. And it's I'm being put on the spot, but it talks about your body being a temple.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's New Testament.
Yeah. It's talking about the body of Christ. Like, it talks about us being the temple of the Holy Spirit. It talks about the community of Christ being the embodiment of the Holy Spirit too, all those things. But I wanted to kind of mention this because I think the sentiment is the same between Leviticus and this New Testament verse about your body being a temple for the Holy Spirit. Let me turn over to you what you think, because I have opinions, but I want to hear from you first.
I actually I had a student text me a couple weeks ago and was like, "Hey, like, can Christians get tattoos?" And I was like, "Yes, but only on your face." And he didn't think that was funny, but I think that, again, context is important. If you read, like, you don't even have to go outside the verse to get a couple notes of context. Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. The fact that these are in the same sentence kind of give a hint to the fact that maybe we're talking about some sort of ritual involving dead people. There were cultures and nations around the Israelites who worshipped their gods through cutting themselves or marking themselves in ways. They also interacted with the dead through cutting themselves or marking themselves in various ways. And it was a similar thing. I think it was in the Old Testament, where there's a verse, I believe it's in the Old Testament, where they're talking about like women don't wear jewelry or something like that. Like, in the culture they were near or in or wherever it was, they were like, yeah, however many rings I have, that's a symbol of status. And so the instruction was, don't do that because it's not about your earthly status. Don't do this because it's not about, worshiping other gods through cutting yourself. Like, our God thinks that's the dumbest thing ever. It depends on the motive behind something like a tattoo. I would argue that the first half, like cutting yourself, is probably just a bad idea no matter what. If you want to get a tattoo, I don't really care. Get a tattoo. That's fine by me. As long as you are not doing it to worship some random thing or person, as long as you're doing it because, like, hey, I think this is cool or whatever. I would also turn it around and say that you don't have to worship God with your tattoo. Like, your tattoo does not have to be religious. Uh-huh. It can be a way to express yourself artistically. I have no problem with that, as long as we're putting this verse into context.
As someone who has a beautiful wife who has some tattoos,
she's going to hell. So,
well,
I clearly didn't read Leviticus. There's actually a tattoo shop in Minneapolis called Leviticus. Did you know that?
Oh, I didn't know that, actually. Yeah. Which is hilarious.
Hilarious. Uh-huh. If I ever get a tattoo, I might have to get it there, just because clearly their humor is
top notch.
It matches mine.
Yeah, top notch. What she said, I was actually having this conversation with her and some friends of ours not long ago, which I thought was a really cool concept. They were just saying how, like, tattoos have the ability to tell a really cool story. Like, if you just get like a picture of, some random object on your forearm, like, okay, like, that doesn't tell a huge story. Like, why do you have a picture of a duck on your arm? Well, I like to duck hunt. Oh, cool. Whereas, like, my wife, a few of hers she's got the phases of the moon on her forearm. And that it's indicative of something of our relationship. She has the eating disorder logo on her back arm with a flower. And you wouldn't know it off the draw that's what that is unless you were looking for it, but it kind of tells a part of her journey. And so, like, she's got some cool ideas of things she wants to do as well. One being, she was really close to her grandpa who passed away this last year, and so she's got a voicemail of him saying "I love you," and like she's gonna get the sound waves of that tattooed. Like, that tells a cool story,
Yep.
And so, like, where I'm going with that is, it's. None of those inherently are about Jesus, but they are part of who Meg is, like a part of just what makes my wife. And like, as you get to know her, you'll understand that, like, she loves the Lord that way too. So I think that's a great, just encouragement that it's not that you have to. And to be clear, you also don't have to get a tattoo to share your faith. Like, that's like a trendy thing right now, is getting tattoos. Like, if you don't want to get a tattoo, You don't have to get a tattoo either. But
Nope.
like, we make so many absolutes out of things that are not absolutes, because I'm pretty sure it's also in Leviticus where it says, "Hey, don't cut your hair." Well, I cut my hair pretty frequently.
I was actually planning on getting a haircut after we are done recording today.
Can I do it? Can I
No,
cut your hair?
I do not
Perfect.
trust you. I was thinking on the topic of haircuts, we set the camera up over here primarily because that's the area of my office that we have room to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But is that our good sides?
Do we have a good side?
That's another good question. Do you like a less bad side? That might be something that we have to workshop.
All my sides are bad.
Well, you just record like this.
Trust me, you do not want the backside of me either.
All right, next one. Here we go. Back to James.
Okay,
for this
bring it
one,
on.
James 2:26. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without faith without deeds is dead. Man, there's something wrong. Oh, that made it worse.
This happens to you, I feel like every time
I don't
we record.
understand. Now I'm fine. Like
Yeah.
this is the weirdest thing. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. This is one that people will use to justify the viewpoint of faith plus works is what gets you into heaven.
Yep.
And this is where I'm gonna put Tucker to the test on his first day on the job. You ready for this? Because the graphic, the graphic's gonna appear right here, where typically people are like faith plus works equals salvation. In reality, if you read like literally the rest of the Bible, what it clearly spells out is that faith equals salvation plus works. Like works is on the wrong side of the equation for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so if Tucker made that visual happen, that's awesome. If Tucker didn't make that visual happen because I expect too much of him, then that's my bad. And it just looked like me moving my arm around. That's fine.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is important to realize, like even in this passage, what James is talking about is not like your faith doesn't count your faith doesn't equal salvation unless there's also works with it. Like you have to do these things to get salvation. He is saying that, and I didn't coin this came from somebody else, but your works is not the root of your salvation, it's the fruit of your salvation. Like this should be something that accompanies, like how you know your faith is actually legit is because you want to do all these good deeds that come with faith. And if the good deeds aren't there, it's probably because the faith is lacking.
Yeah.
Like it's not alive in you.
Yeah. Well, and I think I also like to, talk about what deeds are too, because like I think it's one of those things where there's this concept that, well, I got faith, so don't need to be reading my Bible, don't need to pray a whole lot, and at the end of the day, let's say you do give your life you're on your deathbed, you've never read the Bible in your life. If you ask Jesus into your heart, you are going to heaven. Like that is a thing. But the idea is that, like, as you continue to know God, it's not that, I guess, whatever I'm trying to go with this. I think what he's talking about with deeds is like actually doing things with your faith. This is a little different than spiritual disciplines. Like spiritual disciplines and deeds are not created equal here. And so nor am I saying that you need to do those things in order to inherit salvation. But the point is, like, as you give your life to Christ, getting into the Word, getting into prayer, all of those things are imperative to growing with God. And what's amazing is as you do those things, those works will follow. It'll just naturally happen. So that's the thing is, like, what I love about this verse is it's not that you have to intentionally decide, okay, I'm a Christian now, so now I'm going to choose to do good things, right? Like when the internal is good and the internal is changing, the external just follows. You know what I'm saying? Like as a track coach, one of the things I teach a lot is like, when you are running, you have to drive your arms forward and backwards, because what that does is that aligns your hips now so that you can run more efficiently. You don't intentionally choose to turn your hips when you're running. You just automatically align them with your arms. Same concept here. When you are going all in for God, your deeds will follow. So when I look at this verse, I don't know how you feel about this, but what he's essentially saying is like, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. He's basically saying, like, if you don't have deeds, it's maybe because your faith isn't super, super strong. You know, because like if your faith is super, super strong, your deeds will naturally follow. And so it's not that you have to choose inherently to do the deeds. It's that, like, if your faith is really, really strong, your deeds will follow.
Yeah, and it actually plays really nicely into the next verse that I want to talk about, which is Psalm 37:4. Which says, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart."
Like a Ferrari.
Exactly. I have many desires in my heart that I would love for the Lord to give me. Second, third house would be cool. Some vacation homes. We just had spring break up here, and I stayed in Minnesota the whole time, and a bunch of my students went to Florida, so that was unfortunate to maybe boycott social media that week if you're depressed as a Minnesotan. But I think that a lot of people interpret this to mean that, like, if you follow God, He'll give you whatever you want. The previous verses in that psalm talk about loving the things opposite of what evil people love. And I think that both of these verses kind of go step in step with the overall idea that, like, yeah, God will absolutely give you the desires of your heart when your faith is super strong, because when your faith is super strong, the desires of your heart align very closely with the desires of His heart. When your faith is super strong, your actions align very closely with what His actions would be, His deeds. And so if your deeds don't match what He would do, if your deeds don't match His heart, it's probably because your faith isn't where it needs to be. If your desires do not match His heart, that's probably because your faith is not where it needs to be.
Yeah. I mean, Matthew 6, seek first the kingdom and all these things will be given to you, like same kind of concept. As you seek the kingdom, as you seek Jesus, it's amazing how your heart begins to change.
Yeah.
I do believe that God blesses us with things that we want and enjoy, but I don't inherently think it's a result of this verse. I think it's just like out of the goodness of Him, and it's really, really good concept. All right, we got one more here.
Last one. Bring it home, Derek.
This is one of my personal favorites. Matthew 5:29. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. I wish
I had a spoon here to illustrate for people what that looks like.
So nasty. I think like it's pretty easy to understand that this is more of a metaphorical sense, right? Like no one reads this and goes, okay, I'm going to chop my own hand off here. Like no one's doing that. But I think we do read this and go, we're just going to like take some drastic actions that maybe aren't super, super helpful. I don't know about you, getting real personal here. I see this verse referenced the most in reference to like addictions, or especially like pornography addictions.
Yeah.
And in that case, like I think like, okay, like if your phone is the source of your temptation, like I'm not saying go and smash it with a hammer, but like put some apps on it,
When it arrives, I'll smash it with a hammer. Or to save on postage, I'll just poison him with this. Pretty good, huh? I spent a long time watching that movie, memorizing every line. Emperor's New Groove for the win.
Do you know how much fun Tucker could have with that right there?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
To see you dive into that and just to see the crickets of...
Yeah.
I'm impressed, though. That was flawlessly executed.
Thank you.
Well done.
I appreciate it. Anyways.
I was saying...
don't smash it with a hammer.
Don't smash it with a hammer. But, like, I do think it's good. Like, if your phone is your source of temptation, put a blocker on there. Put an accountability software on there. Like, I'm great with that. But where I've seen this taken way out of context is, this person's not good for me, for my life, so I'm just going to cut them out entirely. Like, that's not helpful either. Like, if you need distance from somebody, great. But I've seen this where it's like, okay, like, I'm going to just completely cut this person or this thing out of my life because it's
we're ghosting starting right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, that's not the proper way to go about this.
Yeah.
You know, like there are certain times in your life where you have to draw a line and draw boundaries and do all those things. But I just don't think this is the problem I have with this verse. And I think this could kind of sum up every single verse out of context. When you use scripture to convey an idea that's not inherently scriptural, that's a problem.
Yep.
When you use God's word to convey something that's not God's heart, that's a really big problem.
Yeah.
You know, like, imagine you go up to somebody that isn't good for you and you go up and say, you know what? Hey, like, I'm cutting you out of my life because you're not good for me. Like,
God told me to do it.
Right? But that happens, especially early on in our faith. And so, you know, I think that's why it's so critical to understand context. It's not just because it gives the fuller picture of what it's actually trying to say, but I think sometimes we represent God wrong because we're not operating under, we're using his words to say something he never actually said. Mm-hmm. You could take something I said entirely out of context and make me say something I never actually said. You know, like if I said like, Kyle, I think you're the worst human being, and then I laughed, like if you were to cut that laugh off, like I'd look like a complete jerk. I meant it, but I'd look like a jerk still, you know? So
fair.
It's but that's my point, is like you can just out of context stuff just really can kind of give you a wrong idea of what God actually intends to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It also doesn't, like, you know, even if that person is bad for you, like, okay, create a healthy boundary.
Yeah.
And then when you are in a healthier place, witness to them. Bring them along with you. Like that's a huge win. You can't do that if you ghosted them. They're probably not going to call you back when you do want to tell them about Jesus.
Amen, brother.
That's a lot of verses, and we could probably have talked for a lot more about taking some stuff out of context. But hopefully, that gives you some encouragement on how not to use the Bible, how not to read the Bible. Brought to you by How Not to Be a Youth Pastor.
Nice.
Thank you very much. All right. I think that does it for today's episode. Right about now, if you're watching, we're grooving to the outro music. I could be off in my beat, but I'm just going to assume that it's there.
You are off no matter what happens.
That's true.
And when you say we're grooving,
dancing is not, you're not, yeah, you kind of let me down there. Dancing is not really my thing.
No, I can't sing or dance. And for the sake of our listeners, I'm choosing to not.
Well, for the sake of our viewers, you're choosing not to. Because we have those now. The listeners don't care what you do with your body other than your vocal cords.
Shameless plug here. As we continue to advance here, give us a 5-star review on any of your streaming platforms. If you do this, if you're on YouTube and this is the first video, drop us a comment. Tell us we look really good, because we know we do.
Also, we just need the self-esteem boost.
That's correct. Especially me, because Kyle continually smashes mine.
I thought I was pretty nice this episode.
You were actually very nice today.
Well, tune in next week to hear all the mean things I say about Derek.
Perfect.
All right. We got to get out of here. I think it's about time that I go get some more Skittles. Goodbye.
Moment of truth. Did it record? I sure hope.